We'll talk about something that we're going to refer to as operational definitions. An operational definition is the way of defining something that can't be directly defined. In education, we try to do this all the time. For example, let me make a distinction between concepts and constructs. If I say something like the word chair, do you know what a chair is? Yeah, all chairs aren't the same, but you know what one is. You know it's got a place to sit, probably has a back to it, has one or more connections with the floor, either four legs or rollers or something like that. We know what a chair is. It's not hard to define, not hard to know it when we see it. If I say the word dog, you know what a dog is? Yeah, it's got four legs usually. We had a campus pet named Tripod one time, but normally, there are exceptions. But a dog has four legs, barks, has fur. All dogs aren't the same, but we know what dogs are based on similarities. The four legs, fur, barks, wags its tail when it's happy, and that sort of thing. So that's a concept. But look at what we try to measure in education. We try to measure intelligence. I can recognize a dog a lot quicker than I can recognize intelligence. You can't directly see it. It's not tangible. We talk about someone with potential. You might kind of know if someone has a degree of potential or what degree of potential they have or not, but you might not. It's harder to get a handle. Those are called constructs. Aptitude is a construct. Attitude is a construct. Attitude is a construct that we typically, or that we often misuse. If I say something like, well, she's got a real attitude, well, of course she does. We usually mean that negatively, when in fact an attitude is neither good or bad. It is positive or negative, however. But I would not necessarily equate a positive attitude with good and a negative attitude with bad. For example, I have a negative attitude toward childhood sexual abuse. I think that's probably a good thing to have. So don't you don't label it as good or bad necessarily. We may even say he's got a bad attitude. Well, no, he might have a negative attitude toward things, but it's not, and it may be it may be not what we would desire, but more properly it's positive or negative, and it's not just an attitude. But that's the kind of thing that we all know what you mean when you say that, and I say it too. But to measure things that are not directly measurable, we need to have operational definitions. That essentially means, okay, I can't see intelligence directly, but here are the tangible things that I can see or I can look for that would likely be indicative as to the amount of intelligence that's present in someone. We typically measure intelligence in test scores, and we can argue about that till the cows come home. And I'm not going to. We all know the issues there. So the key thing about operational definitions is whether or not a behavior is directly observable. And let me give you some scenarios. I've given you a handout in your on D2L, and I'll just call it up and we'll look at it together. I just want to kind of go through some examples. We'll just kind of hit these. It's kind of a worksheet, but we'll just kind of go through them together. Of course, I have closed out my Word stopped working. Hang on, let me find it again real quick. Okay. Operational definitions. We are trying to operationalize rapport. Rapport is a construct. You can't directly see it. But these are some things, A through I things, that may or may not be directly observable. To be part of an operational definition, it's got to be directly observable. And the question is, are these things directly observable? Now, I'm not saying that they're necessarily indicative of rapport, but the key question here, and there are a couple of them I'm going to argue both ways about, are they directly observable? Can I directly observe, for example, in A, where the students can identify each other by name? Yeah, I can directly see that. How about having a good sense of humor? I don't know what, I think I know what a good sense of humor, but I notice not everybody agrees with me on my sense of humor. Imagine that. So no, good is a fuzzy term that you can't really, you can't get a handle on. It's subjective is a good word to use, yeah. Having respect for the opinions of others. No, respect is a construct too, because I can't define a construct with a construct. Making no remarks perceived as derogatory by the observer. Don't answer too quickly on this one. If the observer says so or not. Well, the observer is going to report his or her perception. The answer is yes. This is directly observable. Now, it's also subject to what the observer thinks is derogatory. If I said making no derogatory remarks, I couldn't do that one. But if I say as perceived by the observer, okay, yes, a little bit of a caveat. It's kind of like measuring perceptions. And, of course, the question is always, well, how close to reality are perceptions? Well, I don't know. But by hanging this on what the observer says, yeah, that's directly observable. Again, there's one that may or may not be a good part of an operational definition for rapport. I don't know. Valuing other students as persons, I can't directly see valuing. Naming a hobby that another student likes, yeah, I can see that. Can you name a hobby Jack likes? I can tell if you can or not. Being chosen frequently by other students for games? The answer is it depends. If we define frequently, yes. If we don't define frequently, no. So there's some fuzziness even in our attempt to shave off the fuzziness. Having other students smile when they talk to him? Yeah, assuming I know the difference between a smile and a smirk, probably so. Yeah, I can probably see if they're smiling or not. And you can argue if that's a good definition of rapport or not. I don't know. These are just some maybes here. Initiating conversation with other students. Yeah, you can tell who starts the conversation. So some of these are directly observable, some are not. The ones that are not directly observable can't be part of the operational definitions. Even the ones that are directly observable, there's some, maybe, I don't know, some of these are probably closer to rapport than others. Just because something is directly observable doesn't mean that's a good operational definition. It does have to point toward the thing that you're measuring. I'm missing a comment. Comments made that you can directly see if someone doesn't respect the person. Sometimes. If I'm ignoring someone, I'm not respecting them, but I can't tell if that's why I'm ignoring them or not. But yeah, I would agree that there are cases where you can see This is one of those things where it's kind of like the old Supreme Court definition of obscenity. I know it when I see it. That's probably true, but it's not good enough to measure something with. Okay, let's just kind of flesh out a couple of operational definitions. You want to teach children how to do long division. How can you operationally define whether someone can do long division or not? So, and those of you feel free to. And I encourage you, please type in some things here. Well, the comment was made about writing a specific algorithm. Well, we know the algorithm. We're trying to teach the algorithm. That's the process. But how do I know if a student can do that? See if they can solve problems. Sure. And you might even go so far as to, it's a little bit like writing learning objectives. You might want to, we talked about just a second ago about measuring certain things by giving tests. Okay, I'll give a long division test. And I might want to specify that, you've got to get 70% of these correct. So there may be a level of performance. There might be some special conditions like a time limit, which I tend to not feel real good about, but you do at some point. But there's really no such thing as an untimed test. Otherwise, people from the 20s will still be sitting in the SAT room if it's that old. But yeah, you say you give them a test. You might set a minimal standard. You might create, or you might include some special conditions that have to be met. But we would operationalize that by if you can actually get the answers. Comments made. You can peer tutor and sometimes see how well the two. That's a good point too, because sometimes you can measure somebody can do something in terms of whether or not they can explain to somebody else. So hey, there's a fair operational definition. If someone can teach someone else to do long division and they're successful at it, well, the tutor in the case it was mentioned, they probably know how to do that too. Here's my favorite one: how to parallel park. How can you tell what parallel parking is? And having said that's my favorite one, I set you up for some things, so probably made everybody nervous. We all know what it means to parallel park. Just tell me what it means. Well, you can't. No, you got to do a little bit. Okay. But what is it? How do I know if you can parallel park? Say it louder. And angle their way in such a way what? But you got to tell me what that is. According to the perception of the instructor, okay, you can always copy. First-hand witness, okay, you're witnessing, but what are you looking for, though? I mean, how does the driver's ed teacher judge? Again, we still need a definition of it. What does he judge it based on? Okay, be specific in terms of handling the car. What do you want to look like at the end when somebody's parallel parked? If they can put the car in this position. Okay, within 1 foot of the curb, parallel. Okay, okay. Well, let's think about that a minute. All right. So let's take the operational definition within one. And thank you for saying that. I was hoping somebody would, because that lets me do this. Okay, here's the parking space, okay? I'm parking my car. According to your definition, I parallel parked. And that points out the difficulty of writing operational definitions. I'm in 1 foot of the curb. Within 2 feet of the vehicle in front and behind you, okay? 2 feet here. 2 feet here. Now, what if it's not possible to be within 2 feet of both of them? Maybe my car is short. Maybe I drive one of those little bitty smart aleck cars. That's the edited version. I mean, you might say no closer than 2 feet. But let's look at that within within a foot of the curb. I parked my car within a foot of the curb. But I don't have painted marks over here or over here for that matter. I'm between, the only 2 painted marks I probably have are this one, this one. I'm between the painted marks. Obviously, I'm being a little contentious here, but to make a point. Not hitting the cars. I've gotten here. I've not hit the cars. I contend that based on what you told me, I am parallel parked. I'm no closer than 2 feet of the car in front of me or behind me. I'm within a foot of the curb. I'm over the curb, but I'm within a foot of it. And again, I am trying to be contentious for, on the road. Well, this is not the road. The road's over here. Well, but this is not on the road. This is the parking space. So I'm going to argue with pretty much anything you say, which is kind of my point. We would not, even though we might, when we write down the words, this may be within the definition that we've written down, but we really don't mean to let this be parallel parking. So, and that's my point. We have to make sure that my words actually describe, they don't leave room for things that are not what we're trying to define. No, my family, we thought I come from a proud tradition of pig thieves and moonshiners. The lawyers were on the other side of my family. Okay, so we may want to say not over the curb, or without touching the curb. Obviously, I've had to touch the curb. I've had some really fun operation definitions suggesting somebody said without hitting the front of one car or the other. Someone said without shifting gears more than 7 times or something like that, which I have to kind of, sometimes I do that too. Anyway, my point is, it's kind of like kind of the old things, questions you can ask. Fill in the blank. Columbus discovered America in blank. The suggestion was made in 1492. That's not what I'm looking for. Columbus discovered America in a boat. That's the correct answer. I'm looking for what. If I'm looking for what you said the year, I need to ask what I'm looking for. So if I'm constructing some kind of instrument to measure something, I need to make sure I'm going to get the information I'm looking for. So I have to be specific or write things in such a way that don't allow for things that would be correct but not what I'm looking for. This part between the lines or within a foot of the curb, yeah, okay, that works for parallel park, but I've got some things that I can do to still meet those guidelines, but it ain't parallel parking. Where was the Declaration of Independence signed? At the bottom. If I want to know the city, I need to ask for the city. Yes. Yes, you got it. Okay. But if I want to ask in what city was the Declaration of Independence, then I need to say that. So if I'm trying to measure where they know what city it is, I need to ask them what city it is. That's the one I plan on spending the most on. Just very quickly, how do you define disruptive outburst? We know what they are. All of us who've ever spent any time in school as students or teachers, you know what a disruptive outburst is. And I'm not going to argue whether something is or isn't, but how do you operationally define it? I've had people say things like, if you speak without raising your hand. Maybe. If the decibel level gets over a certain number, maybe. I don't know. So how do you define disruption? Well, it depends. You got to say what it depends on. If you're trying to measure disruptive outbursts, you need to pin down what that means. Here's a good one too. What are moral standards? How would you operationally define moral standards? Well, you obviously it's because you have to agree with me, but that's not very helpful. Yeah. Action that gains the attention of others? Well, maybe, but if I hit a home run in a baseball game, doesn't that get the attention of others? I wouldn't say it's disruptive. So, yeah, I know what you mean by that. Now tell me what moral standards are, besides agreeing with me, which none of you are going to buy. Heck, I don't even agree with myself a lot of times. Somebody says something like, well, if no more than 20% of the girls get pregnant some year, we have a school that has high moral standards. Okay, that's directly observable. I would argue whether that indicates morality or not, but yeah, it's observable. Number 5, last one real quickly. This is something we try to do all the time. How do you measure classroom effectiveness? How do we do it, first of all? Yeah, we look at your students' test scores. That is directly observable. Does that indicate being effective in the classroom? Maybe to some degree. We make up complicated rubrics based on, yeah, you're right. We can't come up with a good operational dictionary definition probably for most of these things. Now, when you do your study for your dissertation, you get to define your terms. You get to say what you mean by this. You get to operationalize it. But anytime you're trying to measure something, if you're trying to measure classroom effectiveness, you have to operationalize it. My colleague, the other quantoid in the department, is fond of saying that if you can define it, we can measure it. That's probably true. But you really have to define it, and that's tough. So if we're going to decide, if we're going to be able to measure something, which is what instruments do, we have to define what we're measuring. And sometimes that's the tough part. One teenage, I totally agree with the comment. Exactly. That's why this thing is so fuzzy. And my job is to point out the fuzziness and make you wrestle with that. Any other questions, thoughts about operational definitions? Okay.